Commander Alan Clark looked out the viewing window of Orbital Station Artemis. The stars were bright against the blackness of space. Earth hung below, blue and peaceful. But Alan was not peaceful. He was angry. He turned back to his small office and the stack of papers on his desk. Personnel reports, equipment failures, budget denials. The Eighth Fleet was falling apart, and no one in high command seemed to care. The salvage squadron, he muttered to himself. That's what other fleets called them. A collection of old ships that should have been scrapped years ago. Crews made up of people who couldn't get better assignments. The leftovers of humanity's Space Force. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Alan said, trying to keep the frustration out of his voice. Lisa Winters stepped into the office. As communications officer, she was one of the few truly talented people in the Eighth Fleet. She could have served on any ship in the fleet, but she stayed with the Eighth. Alan never understood why. "Sir, you need to see this," she said. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. "Another equipment failure?" Alan asked, already reaching for his tablet. "No, sir." Lisa handed him her own tablet. "We picked up a transmission, not from Earth or any of our colonies." Alan frowned. "Not from Earth? Then who?" "It's not human, sir. The transmission is not from humans." Alan felt his heart skip a beat. In the 100 years since humans had started exploring space, they had found no intelligent life. Plenty of planets with basic plant and animal life, but no civilizations, no one to talk to among the stars. "Are you certain?" he asked, looking down at the tablet. "The science team has confirmed it," Lisa said. "And there's something else, sir. The message is directed specifically to us, to the Eighth Fleet." Alan stared at her. "That's impossible. How would aliens even know we exist, let alone know about our fleet structure?" "They've been watching us, apparently. For decades. The translation team is still working on the details, but the message is clear enough. They're asking for our help." Alan looked at the data on the tablet. Strange symbols flowed across the screen, gradually being replaced with English words as the translation program worked. "Help against what?" he asked. "Something they called the Swarm. It has attacked 3 of their worlds already. They're losing the fight." Alan ran a hand through his short gray hair. "But why us? Why the Eighth Fleet? We're the worst equipped fleet in the entire Space Defense Force." Lisa pointed to the last line of the translated message. "Sometimes the weakest blade, wielded by the cleverest hand, cuts deepest." "They think our inadequacies are actually strengths," she explained. "They've observed how we operate with limited resources, how we adapt. They believe we're uniquely qualified to fight this enemy." Alan sat back in his chair trying to process this information. Aliens were real. They were watching humanity, and they thought the military's junk fleet was their best hope for survival. "Have you shared this with High Command?" he asked. "Yes, sir. They've called an emergency meeting. They want you there in person." 2 days later, Alan stood in the grand meeting hall of Earth Defense Headquarters. Representatives from all major governments were present, along with the highest-ranking military officials. The room buzzed with nervous energy. Admiral Susan Bennett approached him before the meeting began. She had always been fair to the Eighth Fleet, even when others mocked them. "This is quite a situation you found yourself in, Clark," she said. "Not by choice," Alan replied. "I still don't understand why these aliens, the Meridians, would pick us specifically." Susan's face grew serious. "I've reviewed their complete message. They've studied all our fleets, our tactics, our technologies. They believe the Swarm adapts to conventional military approaches. The more organized and standardized the attack, the quicker the Swarm learns and counters it. And we're anything but standardized," Alan said with a bitter smile. "Exactly. Your ships are all different models with different modifications. Your crews use unconventional tactics because they have to. The Meridians think this might be the key to defeating the Swarm." The meeting was long and heated. Many officials argued against helping the Meridians. Why risk human lives for an alien species? Others saw a chance to make a powerful ally in space. Eventually, The decision came down to resources. We cannot spare our frontline fleets, the defense secretary announced. If these aliens truly want the 8th Fleet, then that's what they'll get. Commander Clark, you will lead this mission. After the meeting, Susan pulled Alan aside. I pushed for you, she admitted. The truth is, no other fleet would be sent on what many see as a suicide mission. The 8th is viewed as expendable. Alan nodded. He had suspected as much. But, Susan continued, I also truly believe you might succeed where others would fail. Your people think differently. They've survived with old equipment and minimal resources because they're innovative. Back at Orbital Station Artemis, Alan called his senior officers together. He explained the mission and what they knew about the Meridians and the swarm. This is voluntary, he finished. Anyone who wants to stay behind can do so without any mark on their record. The room was silent for a long moment. Then George Murphy, the tactical officer, spoke up. With all due respect, sir, we're used to being underestimated. Might be nice to be wanted for a change. Patricia Miller, chief engineer, nodded in agreement. The Meridians saw something in us that our own people didn't. I'm curious to find out what that is. One by one, each officer voiced their support. No one chose to stay behind. Within a week, the 12 ships of the 8th Fleet were ready to depart. They were a strange collection: outdated cruisers, retrofitted cargo vessels, science ships converted for defense. None would have qualified for any other fleet in the Space Defense Force. As the final preparations were made, Lisa brought Alan one more translated message from the Meridians. Their home system is under attack, she said. The swarm is advancing faster than they predicted. 2 more of their worlds have gone silent. Alan looked at his mismatched fleet on the status display. The weakest blade wielded by the cleverest hand. Then we'd better not keep them waiting, he said. Give the order. We launch in 1 hour. As the fleet moved into jump position, Alan addressed all ships. We've been called the weakest fleet because we lack the newest ships and the shiniest weapons. But weakness isn't defined by equipment, it's defined by spirit. And I've never met a more stubborn, resourceful group of people in my life. The Meridians chose us for a reason. Let's prove them right. With that, the 8th Fleet, humanity's least impressive military force, jumped into deep space to meet their first alien allies and face an enemy that threatened to consume worlds. The journey to Meridian space took 5 days. Alan used that time to prepare his crew as best he could. With so little information about the enemy they would face, preparation meant running drills, checking equipment, and trying to keep everyone calm. George Murphy, the tactical officer, spent most of his time studying the data the Meridians had sent. As a former salvage specialist, George had a talent for seeing value in things others dismissed. There's a pattern to how this swarm attacks, he said during the final briefing before arrival. They always go after the most advanced systems first, the biggest weapons, the strongest shields. They target what they see as the biggest threat, Alan said. Exactly, George nodded. They adapt to conventional attacks quickly, but according to the Meridian data, they've never encountered human technology before. Chief Engineer Patricia Miller had her own insights. Short and strong from years of manual work, Patricia had kept the 8th Fleet's old ships running when most engineers would have given up. I've been looking at the swarm's biology, she said. These creatures seem sensitive to certain radiation patterns, the same kind our engines produce as waste. Lisa Winters raised an eyebrow. Our outdated, inefficient engines? Exactly, Patricia grinned. What's poison to us might be more poison to them. I've already started modifying our weapons systems to take advantage of this. Alan looked around the table at his officers. None of them would have been assigned to a frontline fleet. George was too unorthodox in his tactics. Patricia was brilliant but had no formal engineering degree. Lisa had turned down better positions to stay with her husband, who served as a medic in the 8th, and yet here they were, humanity's representatives to the first alien species they had ever contacted. The irony wasn't lost on Alan. The Meridians chose us because we're different, he told his officers. So let's use that. I want unusual ideas, things no proper fleet would try. The briefing ended with more questions than answers, but Alan felt a new energy among his team. For once, being the misfits of the Space Defense Force might be an advantage. In his quarters that night, Alan recorded a message to be sent back to Earth. He spoke of duty and hope, knowing these might be his final words to those he left behind. The Eighth Fleet was jumping into unknown danger with little chance of return, but they were going anyway. When the fleet emerged from jump space into the Meridian home system, chaos greeted them. The system had 2 suns and 14 planets. One of the smaller moons was being taken apart before their eyes. "The swarm," Lisa whispered, looking at the sensor readings. "They're consuming the moon, turning it into more of themselves." The swarm looked like a mass of dark ships moving as one organism. Each individual unit was about the size of a small shuttle, but thousands moved together in perfect coordination. As Alan watched, the mass pulled another chunk from the moon and began breaking it down. "Any sign of the Meridians?" Alan asked. "Several ships approaching from the 4th planet," Lisa replied. "Their designs match what we know about Meridian vessels." The alien ships were beautiful, made of what looked like crystal and light, but many showed heavy damage. As they drew closer, Lisa's console lit up with an incoming transmission. "They're sending a light-based communication," she said. "The translation program is working on it." The message appeared on the main screen. "You came. We feared you would not. There are fewer of you than we hoped." Alan dictated his response. "We came as soon as we could. We're ready to help. What's the current situation?" The Meridian ships formed a loose circle around the human fleet, as if protecting them. Their next message was grim. "The swarm grows faster than we predicted. 3 more worlds lost. Our defenses fail. We must take you to safety before they detect you." The Meridian ships led the way to a hidden base on the far side of the system's largest gas giant. As they traveled, Alan got his first real look at their allies. The Meridians were not like humans at all. They resembled tall, thin crystals that glowed with inner light. They moved by floating a few inches above the ground and communicated through patterns of light that flashed across their surfaces. Their leader, who took the name Prism to make communication easier, came aboard the USS Defiant, Alan's flagship. The aliens' light patterns translated through Lisa's program. "Your vessels are not what we expected," Prism admitted. "The data we gathered suggested humans possessed more advanced ships." "We do," Alan replied. "But the 8th Fleet is unique. We make do with less. We find solutions others wouldn't consider. This is why we called for you specifically." Prism's lights pulsed with what might have been excitement. "The swarm expects certain responses. It has destroyed 3 other species who came to our aid." "Other species?" George asked. "There are more aliens out there?" "Many," Prism confirmed. "Most avoid this region now because of the swarm. Those who tried to help us were consumed. Yet you believe we can succeed where they failed?" Alan asked. "Your species thinks in ways we cannot," Prism responded. "And your fleet, it is imperfect. The swarm expects perfection. It cannot understand improvisation." Alan wasn't sure if he should be insulted or flattered. But before he could respond, alarms blared across the ship. "Swarm units detected," Lisa called out. "They found us." "How many?" Alan asked, moving quickly to the command chair. "Just 1 ship," Lisa replied. "A scout, maybe. But it's broadcasting to the main mass. They'll all be here soon." Prism's translation came through with urgent flashing. "You must flee while you can." Alan looked at his officers, then back to the alien leader. "We didn't come all this way to run. If that's a scout, then it's seen. Your ships and ours together. The swarm knows we're allies now. There's no going back." He turned to George. "Tactical, target that scout with the modified weapons. Let's see if Patricia's radiation theory holds up." "Targeting," George confirmed. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. A beam of greenish light shot from the Defiant's main cannon, a standard weapon that Patricia had altered to carry engine radiation. It struck the swarm scout directly. The effect was immediate and shocking. Instead of absorbing the hit or dodging, the scout ship seemed to convulse. Its dark surface rippled and parts of it began to break apart. "It worked," Patricia shouted from engineering. "The radiation is disrupting its molecular cohesion." The scout tried to retreat, but George fired again. This time the ship broke apart completely, its pieces floating aimlessly in space. Prism's light patterns became so bright that Alan had to shield his eyes. "This is unprecedented. The swarm always adapts. Always." Alan allowed himself a small smile. It hasn't met human junk technology before, and we're just getting started. But his moment of triumph was short-lived. Lisa's voice cut through the celebration. "Commander, I'm detecting multiple jump signatures, hundreds of them. The main swarm force is coming." Alan looked at Prism, then at his officers. Their first victory had been small, but it proved the Meridians were right. The 8th Fleet might have a chance against the swarm after all. "Battle stations," he ordered. "And get me a channel to all ships. It's time to show these aliens what humanity's worst fleet can really do." The main swarm force arrived in a wave of dark shapes. Hundreds of units, varying in size from small scouts to massive carriers, filled the space near the gas giant. They moved together perfectly, like one giant organism rather than separate. "Ships, they're surrounding us," Lisa called out from her station. "Cutting off escape routes." Alan studied the tactical display. The 12 ships of the 8th Fleet were arranged in a loose formation with the Meridian vessels. They were heavily outnumbered. "The good news is they don't know what we can do yet," George said. "They saw us destroy one scout, but they don't understand how we did it." "How long until they figure it out?" Alan asked. "Based on previous encounters," Prism's lights translated, "the swarm adapts to new weapons within 3 to 5 uses." Alan nodded. "Then we need different weapons for each attack. Patricia, how many radiation variants can you create?" "The chief," engineer's voice came through the comm. "Maybe 7 or 8 using what we have on board. If the Meridians can provide materials, maybe more." "Get started on that," Alan ordered. "George, I want attack patterns that make no sense. Random movements. Unpredictable firing sequences." "Already on it, sir," George replied with a grin. Prism watched this exchange with pulsing lights that the translator couldn't quite interpret. Finally, the alien spoke. "Your approach is unlike any we have seen. You embrace chaos." "We call it creativity," Alan said. "Now let's get your people moving. We need to evacuate as many Meridians as possible from the nearby worlds while we keep the swarm busy." The battle began moments later. The swarm moved forward in perfect lines, each unit protecting the others. They targeted the largest ships first, just as George had predicted. But the 8th Fleet didn't respond as expected. Instead of forming a defensive line, their ships scattered in different directions. Each one used different tactics, different weapons, and different movement patterns. The USS Defiant fired its modified radiation cannon at the lead swarm unit. The beam struck with the same devastating effect as before, causing the unit to break apart. 2 more shots, 2 more swarm units destroyed, but the 4th shot had less impact. The 5th barely slowed the target down. "They're adapting," Alan said grimly. Patricia switched to the next radiation variant. As the battle continued, the human ships worked with the Meridians to hold the swarm at bay. Each time the swarm adapted to one weapon, the fleet switched to another. When one tactic stopped working, they tried something new. The USS Pioneer, an old science vessel commanded by Captain Frank Harris, used its soil sampling tools to fire superheated rock fragments at the swarm. The USS Venture, a retrofitted mining ship, launched drilling pods that attached to swarm units and bored into their hulls. None of these attacks would have worked against proper military vessels, but the swarm, used to facing standardized weapons, struggled to adapt to the strange variety. 3 hours into the battle, the 8th Fleet had destroyed more swarm units than any previous defender. But they were running out of tricks. "Radiation. Variant 7 is ineffective," Patricia reported. "That's our last one." At the same time, a massive explosion rocked the USS Venture. The ship's engines went dark. "The Venture is hit bad," Lisa reported. "Life support failing. Swarm units are moving in to finish her off." Alan made a quick decision. "All ships, converge on the Venture's position. We need to buy them time to evacuate. As the fleet moved to protect their damaged companion, Alan noticed something strange about the swarm's formation. The units weren't moving quite as perfectly as before. Some seemed to lag behind others. They're struggling to coordinate, he realized. Having to adapt to so many different attacks at once is slowing down their response time. George nodded. It's like they have one brain trying to solve too many problems. An idea formed in Alan's mind. Lisa, open a channel to all ships. I want everyone to change tactics right now. Whatever you've been doing, do something different. If you were moving fast, go slow. If you were attacking, start defending, complete reversal. The effect was immediate and striking. The swarm unit seemed to freeze for a moment, as if confused by the sudden change. Several collided with each other, while others fired at empty space. It's working, George shouted. They can't adapt fast enough. Alan turned to Prism. Can your ships do the same? Change everything about how they're fighting? The alien's lights flashed rapidly. We are not built for such improvisation, but we will try. The Meridian vessels, which had been fighting in their traditional formations, began to move in new patterns. They weren't as unpredictable as the human ships, but it was enough to add to the swarm's confusion. For 10 crucial minutes, the combined fleet gained the upper hand. They created a safe corridor for the Venture's crew to evacuate to other ships. Escape pods launched from the damaged vessel, racing toward the USS Defiant and the remaining fleet. But the advantage couldn't last. Gradually, the swarm began to adapt again. Their movements became smoother, their attacks more coordinated. And the 8th Fleet was running out of ships and ideas. We've lost the Pioneer, Lisa reported, her voice tight. The Horizon is badly damaged, and the Venture. She didn't need to finish. They all watched as the empty ship was torn apart by swarm units. We need to retreat, Alan decided. We've learned what works against them, but we need to regroup and come up with new strategies. He turned to Prism. Is there somewhere safe we can go? The alien hesitated, light patterns flickering uncertainly. There is a moon on the far side of the system. Its mineral composition blocks the swarm's sensors. We have a small base there. Then that's where we're going, Alan said. All ships, prepare for emergency jump on my mark. As the fleet prepared to retreat, the USS Horizon, already badly damaged, positioned itself between the swarm and the rest of the ships. Captain Paul Gray is staying behind, Lisa said, her voice breaking. He's going to cover our escape. Alan wanted to order Paul to leave with them, but he knew it wouldn't help. The Horizon was too damaged to make the jump, and someone had to hold the swarm back. Put him through, Alan said. Paul's voice came through the calm, despite the situation. Don't waste this, Alan. Learn from what we did here. Come back stronger. Before Alan could respond, the Horizon charged directly into the densest part of the swarm. Its remaining weapons fired in all directions, creating chaos among the enemy units. Then, in a final act of defiance, the ship's engines overloaded. The explosion tore through the swarm formation, destroying dozens of units and disrupting many more. In the confusion, the rest of the fleet made their jump to safety. At the hidden moon base, Alan looked at what remained of his command. 9 ships out of 12. Hundreds of crew members lost. The Meridians had suffered losses too, but they had also achieved something remarkable. For the first time, someone had fought the swarm and survived to tell about it. We'll honor their sacrifice, Alan told his remaining officers, by finding a way to win this fight. As the fleet licked its wounds, Alan knew the real battle was just beginning. The swarm would be ready for their tricks next time. They needed something new, something the enemy could never adapt to. The answer, he suspected, would come from the very thing that made the 8th Fleet different from all others: their ability to turn weakness into strength. The moon base was small and crowded. Built inside a series of natural caves, it had never been meant to hold so many Meridians and humans together. But it was all they had. 3 days passed as the fleet repaired their ships and treated the wounded. Alan spent most of that time with his remaining officers, trying to come up with a new plan. The swarm hasn't found us yet, Lisa reported during their latest meeting. The minerals in this moon are blocking their sensors, just like Prism said. But they're still out there, George added. Getting stronger. They've consumed half of the fourth planet by now. The mood in the room was grim. Their first battle had shown they could hurt the swarm, but at a terrible cost. 3 ships lost, hundreds of crew members dead or injured, and they were no closer to a real victory. Patricia Miller had been unusually quiet during the meeting. Alan noticed the chief engineer staring at a tablet, her eyes narrowed in concentration. Patricia, do you have something? She looked up, surprised, to be called on. Maybe I've been studying the swarm's communication patterns. There's something odd about them. She put her tablet on the table, showing a series of wave patterns. The swarm units stay in perfect sync even when they're far apart. There's no delay in their reactions, no matter the distance. What does that mean? Alan asked. It means they're not using normal communication methods. Light speed, radio, even quantum messaging, they all have some delay. The swarm has none. Patricia tapped the screen. I think they're using quantum entanglement at a level we've never seen before. Every unit is connected to every other unit, sharing information instantly. Lisa leaned forward. That's how they adapt so quickly. Whatever one unit learns, they all learn at the same time. Exactly, Patricia nodded, but it also might be their weakness. Quantum entanglement is incredibly sensitive to outside interference. If we could disrupt it somehow, we could break their coordination, Alan finished. Instead of fighting one smart enemy, we'd be fighting lots of dumb ones. The idea was promising, but building a quantum disruptor wasn't easy. Patricia needed materials they didn't have, and expertise beyond her own. Fortunately, the Meridians were masters of quantum physics. Working together, human engineers and Meridian scientists developed a plan. They would build a device that could generate an interfering quantum field. At the right frequency, it would break the entanglement between swarm units, cutting off their instant communication. But there was a problem. The disruptor has a limited range, Patricia explained. Maybe 5 miles at most. And it needs to be activated from inside the main swarm mass to affect the whole thing. Inside? Alan asked. How are we supposed to get it inside? The room fell silent as everyone considered the implications. Someone would need to pilot a ship directly into the heart of the swarm, knowing they wouldn't come back. It was George, who broke the silence. The USS Persistence. It's our smallest ship and it's fast. With the right modifications, it could get deep enough into the swarm before they could stop it. Alan nodded slowly. He didn't want to ask the next question, but he had to. Who would pilot it? Before anyone could volunteer, a voice spoke from the doorway. I will. They all turned to see Lieutenant Kevin Foster standing there. Young and quiet, Kevin was the Persistence's captain. He rarely spoke at meetings, preferring to let others do the talking. Kevin, Alan began, you don't have to. The Persistence is my ship, Kevin said simply. I know every inch of her. I can get her where she needs to go. Alan wanted to refuse. Kevin was one of his youngest officers, with a promising future ahead of him, but he could see the determination in the lieutenant's eyes. This wasn't a rash decision. We'll find another way. Alan tried again. Kevin shook his head. There is no other way, and you know it. We're running out of time. The swarm is growing stronger every day. The meeting ended with no firm decision, but everyone knew what would happen. The quantum disruptor would be built, the Persistence would be modified, and Kevin would pilot it into the heart of the swarm. Over the next 2 days, the combined human Meridian team worked frantically to prepare. The quantum disruptor was a strange device, partly human technology, partly Meridian crystal. It pulsed with an eerie light and made a sound that hurt human ears. The USS Persistence was stripped of everything except the essential systems. No weapons, minimal life support, just engines and shields. Every bit of saved weight meant more speed, more chance of reaching the target. On the night before the mission, the remaining crew of the 8th Fleet gathered with their Meridian allies for a meal. Despite their differences, they had formed a bond in the face of a common enemy. Stories were shared, memories honored. Alan found Kevin sitting alone near the end of the gathering. The young lieutenant was looking at a small photo of his family, back on Earth. Having second thoughts? Alan asked, sitting next to him. Kevin shook his head. No, sir. Just saying goodbye, I guess. Alan struggled to find the right words. As a commander, he had lost people before, but never like this, never sending someone on a mission they couldn't survive. What we're asking of you? You're not asking, sir, Kevin interrupted. I'm volunteering. There's a difference. Why? Alan couldn't help but ask. Kevin was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Because it matters. All my life, I've wanted to do something that really mattered. Back home, the 8th Fleet was a joke. We were the ships and crews nobody wanted. But here we might save an entire civilization. He looked up at Alan. That's worth dying for. Alan couldn't argue with that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the Meridians communicate with their light patterns. So different from humans, yet fighting for the same thing. Survival. Prism approached them, light patterns subdued. The alien had learned that humans found bright flashes uncomfortable. Your people value individual life, Prism observed. Yet you sacrifice for others. This contradiction fascinates us. It's not a contradiction, Kevin replied. It's because we value life that we're willing to risk it. I'm not throwing my life away. I'm fighting for something worth dying for. Prism's lights pulsed in what might have been understanding. Among my people we have a saying, the brightest light casts the longest shadow. I believe humans would call it leaving a legacy. As the gathering ended and people returned to their quarters, Alan knew the next day would define the future of two species. Either they would break the swarm's power or they would fall like all who had faced it before. What gave him hope was not their weapons or their plans, but the spirit he'd seen in Kevin and all his crew. The 8th Fleet might have been humanity's weakest, but weakness had taught them something the swarm could never understand: how to face impossible odds and still find a way forward. Tomorrow would tell if that was enough. Morning came too quickly. The fleet prepared for what everyone knew might be their final battle. Each ship ran final checks on weapons and shields. Each crew said quiet goodbyes to friends on other vessels. On the USS Persistence, Kevin Foster made his own preparations. The small ship had been stripped down to little more than engines, minimal life support, and the quantum disruptor. The device hummed in the cargo bay, crystals pulsing with strange light. Alan visited the ship one last time before launch. He found Kevin in the cockpit, running through pre-flight checks. Everything ready? Alan asked, though he knew the answer. Kevin nodded. All set, sir. The disruptor is stable. Course is plotted straight into the center of the swarm mass. Alan handed him a small data chip. This just arrived from Earth. They finally responded to our messages. Kevin took the chip but didn't insert it into the console. What does it say? That we're on our own, Alan sighed. No reinforcements. The other fleets are needed to defend human colonies in case we fail. Kevin smiled slightly. So, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed, Alan agreed. It's still just us. The fleet nobody wanted. There was a moment of silence between them. So much to say. So few words that seemed right. I should thank you, Kevin said finally, for giving me a chance. Most commanders wouldn't have put someone my age in charge of a ship. Most commanders wouldn't have had a choice. The 8th Fleet wasn't exactly overwhelmed with volunteers. Alan put a hand on the young man's shoulder. But for what it's worth, you've proven me right. You're one of the finest officers I've ever served with. They shook hands, both knowing it was for the last time. Alan left the Persistence with a heavy heart, but a clear purpose. There was still a battle to fight, a plan to execute. The fleet launched from the moon base 2 hours later. 9 human ships and 14 Meridian vessels moved into attack formation. At the center of their formation flew the USS Persistence, protected on all sides. Their target was the main swarm mass, now grown to almost planetary size. It hung in space like a dark cloud, consuming everything in its path. The swarm has detected us, Lisa reported from her station on the USS Defiant. "They're moving to intercept." Alan nodded. "All ships, remember the plan. Keep the swarm distracted. Give the Persistence its opening." The battle began much like the first one. The swarm units moved in perfect coordination, targeting what they perceived as the biggest threats. But this time, the human Meridian fleet was ready. Every ship used different tactics, different weapons, different movement patterns. Some charged forward, others hung back. Some fired continuously, others waited for precise moments. The USS Defiant led the attack, drawing the most attention. Alan wanted the swarm focused on his ship, not on the small vessel waiting for its moment. "They're adapting faster this time," George warned after 30 minutes of fighting. "They remember us." Alan had expected this. Change it up. Switch to Plan B. All ships, implement random pattern Delta. The fleet's movements became even more chaotic. Ships that had been attacking suddenly retreated. Those that had been defending suddenly attacked. The Meridian vessels, now more comfortable with human unpredictability, changed their patterns too. For a few crucial minutes, the swarm seemed confused again. A gap opened in their formation, a path leading straight to the center of the mass. "Now," Alan ordered. "Kevin, go." The USS Persistence shot forward, engines at maximum power. The small ship moved faster than anything the swarm had seen before, a streak of light heading directly toward the heart of the enemy. The swarm reacted quickly, units moving to intercept, but the rest of the fleet redoubled their attacks, keeping the enemy occupied. Meridian ships sacrificed themselves to block swarm units. Human vessels took hits meant for the Persistence. Kevin's voice came through the calm despite the chaos around him. 5 miles to target, shields at 60%. The Persistence took hit after hit, but kept going. Its speed made it hard to target, and the shields Patricia had modified held longer than anyone had expected. 3 miles, shields at 40%. Alan watched on the tactical display as the small ship pushed deeper into the swarm mass. So close now, so close. 1 mile, shields failing, disruptor ready. The Persistence disappeared from sensors as it reached the densest part of the swarm. For several long, agonizing seconds, nothing happened. The battle continued around them, but all eyes on the Defiance bridge were fixed on the tactical display. "Signal from the Persistence?" Alan asked. Lisa shook her head. "Nothing, sir. They're too deep in the swarm mass for our sensors to pick up." Another moment passed, then another. Alan began to fear the worst. If Kevin hadn't made it, if the disruptor hadn't activated, then it happened. A wave of energy spread outward from the center of the swarm, visible even to the naked eye. It wasn't an explosion, but something stranger, like reality itself rippling. The effect on the swarm was immediate and dramatic. Units that had been moving in perfect harmony suddenly drifted in different directions. Some collided with each other. Others fired randomly into space. "It worked," George shouted. "The quantum entanglement is broken." All across the battlefield, the swarm units lost their coordination. What had been one smart enemy became thousands of confused individual ships. Some still fought, but without any plan or purpose. "All ships, press the attack," Alan ordered. "Focus on the largest units first." The combined fleet tore into the disorganized swarm. Without their perfect coordination, the enemy units were far less dangerous. Many didn't even try to defend themselves, as if they no longer remembered how. It took 3 more hours to finish the battle. Not every swarm unit was destroyed. Some fled into deep space, but the main mass was broken. The Meridian system was safe. In the center of where the swarm had been, they found the remains of the USS Persistence. The ship had been torn apart, but it had completed its mission. The quantum disruptor had worked exactly as planned. Kevin Foster was gone, along with many others from both fleets. But their sacrifice had saved countless lives. 1 week later, as the fleet prepared to return to Earth, Prism presented Alan with a gift. It was a crystal sphere containing the complete history and knowledge of Meridian civilization. You came when no others would, Prism said, light patterned solemn. With the least impressive fleet in your military, you achieved what the strongest could not. The Meridians will remember that humanity's greatest strength lies in embracing its weaknesses. Admiral Susan Bennett was waiting when the fleet returned to Earth space. The Eighth Fleet's victory had transformed their reputation overnight. They're calling you heroes now, she told Alan. Every military strategist is studying your tactics. Alan looked out at his battered ships and exhausted crew. We're still the same people we were before, the ones nobody else wanted. We just needed someone to see our potential. The Eighth Fleet was never again called the Salvage Squadron. In diplomatic circles, the Meridians referred to them by a term that roughly translated as the perfect imperfection, a name that eventually became their official designation. And on the memorial built to honor those lost in the conflict, a single line was engraved beneath Kevin Foster's name. The weakest blade, wielded by the cleverest hand, cuts deepest of all.